Live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us. We're live streaming here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. We're here every weekday. We start at 1 p.m. We go throughout the afternoon. I want to let people know that in case it's your first time watching. Today, for this episode, we're talking about a couple of things. There's an event going on today at the Tomorrow Theater from the Portland Art Museum in Southeast Portland, where you'd have the opportunity to see both parts of the documentary Pee-wee as Himself about Paul Reubens, Pee-wee Herman. You've probably seen this show up on your HBO, and the documentary really is an incredible look at both the character Pee-wee Herman, but really the person behind that, Paul Reubens, and really gets into details about him, interviews with him, and the creator of this documentary is Matt Wolf. And Matt's going to be there at the theater tonight, but he's joining us here right now. And Matt, thank you for being here. Really incredible work, I think, for anybody who's a fan of Paul Reubens' work. Obviously, it hits home, but even for people who aren't, who maybe didn't know much about him, you really learn a lot about the person. And I wanted to start off, just asking you, for a little bit of that backstory, I guess, of how your relationship began with him to begin with, to even get access like this to do this documentary.
Well, Paul Reubens was really my dream subject. If you meet a documentary filmmaker, you can ask them who their dream subject is. He was mine. And I pursued meeting him for a long time, as did many other people. And he had an interest in doing a documentary, but a lot of anxiety and fear of committing to a director. I met him during the peak of the pandemic lockdown, and we started to talk. The first thing he said was, "I want to direct this documentary myself." And I said, "Well, I'm here to talk to you about me directing the documentary." And that began a many months process, hundreds of hours of conversations, just really figuring out what a process could be in which he would feel that he had some measures of control, and I would feel like I had the ability to tell a story as an independent filmmaker the way I do.
And that kind of comes through too, in the series. And I won't spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen it, but you get that feeling from him. I mean, and he even kind of pokes fun at that a few times, and sometimes seems, like he's really enjoying the process. Sometimes seems contentious. So, like when you were doing this and filming him, and so many hours of talking to him, what did that interaction? What was that like behind the scenes, I guess, of doing this and really getting this out of him?
Well, there was a real power struggle between Paul and I. It's not disguised in the film, and it was more intense maybe than you see in the film. But, Paul wanted to maintain control over his narrative. He's somebody who lost control of his personal narrative in the media. And I'm controlling too. I'm a documentary filmmaker who wanted to maintain my editorial independence and integrity. So, we were battling it out behind the scenes, for sure. But I think there was a certain kind of rapport and trust that existed between us as well. I interviewed Paul for over 40 hours for the documentary. And during those interviews, he was incredibly revealing and forthcoming and intimate, but also combative. There were a lot of barbed exchanges between us. But it was all part of a process of getting somebody who forever had been kind of compartmentalized into two people to really reveal himself.
And that's true. I mean, it's such a complicated story to his life and just his public persona. And then, of course, the things that came up that happened, and how that's changed people's view of him. And you tackle so much of that in there, too, to actually get to hear it from him, the things everybody knows, what those things were. But when you were doing this, I guess maybe let me ask you this. For you and the audience and the people that are watching this, what do you think it is about Paul Reubens and his character Pee-wee Herman, but just this person that is so endearing to so many people?
Endearing might be a word, but I also think rebellious or transgressive or wildly creative and entertaining. I think that he was somebody who really created a space where radical acceptance thrives. He kind of championed nonconformity. And anybody who was a little weirder or different, anybody who would grow up to be an artist, I think saw themselves reflected in the world of the playhouse that he created for his children's television show. And I was one of them, for sure. So delight is one word, but I think recognition is another.
Those are all great ways to describe it. And what was it like for you, when this did come out and people finally got to see it? hearing the reaction from people, which obviously this has struck a chord with so many people, and it is a really great story that's shown throughout this, of getting to understand him and so many things that I learned during the two parts. But what was it like for you getting the feedback of this after spending so much time, so many hours, all that work that it took to get this thing done?
Well, obviously, despite our power struggle, behind the scenes, Paul had not revealed to me that he was sick and that he was contemplating his mortality. And then he died. So you can only imagine how surreal the filmmaking process was for me after his death. It was very emotional. The whole process was very emotional. So in a way, I was taken aback when I saw in the viewership of the film how emotional audiences were as well. I thought it was emotional for me for personal reasons, but I think a lot of it had to do with people recognizing how formative the experience of watching Pee-wee's Playhouse or Pee-wee's Big Adventure was for them. And also the poignancy that Paul was not able to fully accept himself as a gay man, even though he had created a space for self-acceptance that meant so much for other people. And then furthermore, on top of that, he had so unjustly been rebuked by the media, and those controversies had overshadowed his artistic accomplishments. And I think people really sympathize with the injustice of that. So, I was told on TikTok there were videos of people crying at the end of the film, and it was just, it was emotional for me to see that. And also, I guess in retrospect, not that surprising, because while Pee-wee is such an iconic figure that is so indelible to many people, Paul Reubens was somebody who was unknown. And so people were meeting somebody who created something of incredible significance to them for the first time. And it happened right before he died. So the whole thing has been a very emotional experience.
Yeah, I mean, I will echo what audience members and what people said on TikTok. It's a very emotional journey. You go through that because there is the joy, you get to learn about his history, and then all the different struggles that he went through. There's anger at certain points. And then the emotion at the end, which is unfortunate, as you mentioned. I mean, the cancer that he had that entire time. My friend compared it to Titanic Part 1, Titanic Part 2, of just, there's a lot of happy stuff, but then the second part, you get to some of the other parts that came through it. For you going to audiences now, or at least here in Portland, you're going to be here at the Tomorrow Theater showing this. How is it, I guess, what can people expect from that? And how different do you think it is having that kind of an experience in a theater with other people in the room at the same time?
Well, the film is long, so buckle up. But I think that people say it flies by. It's fast paced. There's a lot of highs and lows for sure, and it's only screened in the theaters a couple of times. And I think I was shocked that people stayed, given the length of the film. But I think that there's something to the collective experience of kind of recognizing and celebrating somebody who is so impactful generationally amongst the audience. At the last screening of the film that happened in public, I really saw that there are just people who are such deep fans of Pee-wee, but I think who again are really startled and moved by their first time introduction to Paul. And there's people who went to these screenings who had seen it already on television, and I think found it compelling to really hear some anecdotes about the behind the scenes making of the film, but also to experience Paul in full effect on the big screen. It's a unique experience.
Yeah, and I think something about that too, being in a theater and having that other people around you, that sense of community, going through something together too, especially something like this, would be pretty incredible. For that, just last thing, and obviously this is, people can go to the Tomorrow Theater tonight, but for you, was there one moment that, or is there a moment that you'd feel comfortable sharing with us that stood out that wasn't in the documentary, of a moment there with Paul just as a real person?
I'm one of those filmmakers that once I cut something out of a film, I never remember it again. People ask that question, I keep being like, I should come up with some sort of anecdote, something that we cut out of the film. But honestly, it's all that Super 8. We use most of it, but Paul shot this amazing Super 8 road trip across the country with his friends from art school, his early relationship with a painter named Guy. And, it just, every single frame of that, whether it was at the Groundlings Theater, it was just so revelatory and intimate and really from Paul's point of view. So I remember the excitement of seeing it for the first time, and I cherish every frame of it.
I gotta say, yeah, I was gonna bring that up to you. Yeah, just as a filmmaker, that had to be so awesome to have so much footage and pictures and all that of him young, which, I mean, I've never seen. I have no idea if any of that's ever been out there before, but really amazing stuff to see. And Matt, thank you for doing this and for creating this and getting this story out there and somehow convincing Paul to do that, to talk to you and making it through. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. Anything else that you think is important for people to know going tonight or just watching the documentary in general?
I think just go with an open mind and learn about somebody who was a generation defining artist who chose a very anonymous life until he had no choice but to be kind of publicly known through the darkest and most difficult times in his life. And I hope this film is a meaningful reappraisal that finally does justice to Paul as an artist, not just as an entertainer or as his alter ego, but as himself. So I hope people make it.
Matt, thank you very much for having time to talk to us. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great to meet you, Greg.
Yeah, great to meet you too. And for everybody watching, this is Fox 12 Now. We're going to take a break. We'll continue on here in just a little bit, but I appreciate you joining us. So the Tomorrow Theater there in Southeast Division in Southeast Portland. You can go there and obviously see this tonight and hear from Matt in person. So thanks for being here. We'll take a break.